Alright, so it's now been several days since Apple released iOS 26.3, and as per usual, I always like to come back and share with you guys my thoughts on the software so far. I want to talk about the battery, the performance, but I also want to talk about the upcoming iOS 26.4. This is the software that a lot of users were looking forward to because of the new Siri. Now, we have some information, I guess you can say some bad news or unfortunate information in regards to what we can expect with iOS 26.4, but first let's talk about iOS 26.3. So the first thing I want to talk about is battery life. I feel like this is the question that I get the most. So let's go into the battery section here. And I've been pushing this iPhone to the limit here. And as you can see here, it definitely shows. If we go into the about section here for the battery information, I've used more battery today than I normally do. So I've been pushing this iPhone to the limit with over 10 hours of on-screen time, watching YouTube videos, browsing social media, and so forth. Now, keep in mind that battery life is always going to depend on how you use your device. This is going to be different for everyone, but what I can say is that iOS 26.3, in my opinion, definitely improves battery life slightly when compared to previous versions of iOS 26, like 26.2. Now, I want to talk about performance and also Wi-Fi. Remember, we had some Wi-Fi issues being reported. Unfortunately, I still have those Wi-Fi issues where sometimes I leave the studio and come back and it won't automatically reconnect to my Wi-Fi network. I'm not sure why this continues to happen here, but definitely still having some of those Wi-Fi connection issues. I also want to talk about a Geekbench performance test that I ran here. You see here, this is iOS 26.3 versus iOS 26.2, same iPhone. You see there, I want you to focus on the multi-core performance. So we have 3,130 with iOS 26.3. Now we see about a 600 drop when compared to iOS 26.2. We have 3,731. So about a drop of 600 points approximately on the multi-core performance side of things when we compare iOS 26.3 to 26.2. Now, the single core performance is nearly identical, so not a whole lot to talk about there. But yeah, I just wanted to note those a few things here that I've noticed with in terms of performance on this latest update. Now, one thing to note, if you're still waiting to update to iOS 26.3, security is a major update with this one. So you see here about security content of iOS 26.3 and iPadOS 26.3. We have over 30 security patches being put in place. We see some network issues being resolved here. We also see additional issues and patches within Game Center and so much more. We see here even kernel patches. So definitely a major security improvements here with iOS 26.3. So if you're still thinking about updating, this alone should be enough for you to consider upgrading to iOS 26.3 if you're running an earlier version of iOS 26. Okay, so now let's focus on iOS 26.4, which is the next major update Apple should start testing soon. So you may remember when I talked about this report last week coming from Mark Gurman, and I quote, Apple's first iOS 26.4 beta planned to include parts of the new Siri for developers. It is scheduled for the week of February the 23rd. There's also a product launch schedule for the week of March 2nd. And now fast forward a week later, and now Mark Gurman provides yet another update. And it's unfortunate because according to this report, I quote, Apple's long-planned upgrade to the Siri virtual assistant has run into some snag during testing in recent weeks, potentially pushing back the release of several highly anticipated functions to at least iOS 26.5 and iOS 27. Now, Apple did tell CNBC that it is still on track to launch the next version of Siri this year, 2026, which was Apple's original deadline. Now, keep in mind, things are constantly changing, and Apple may have plans to launch Siri with iOS 26.4, but at last minute, changing their mind due to certain issues. I'm not saying that Mark Gurman is either right or wrong. Most likely, Apple would start introducing the next version of Siri with the next versions of iOS 26.4, 26.5. We don't know at this point, but according to the latest report, it could be pushed back. And keep in mind, Apple never really said iOS 26.4. This was all based on all the reports from, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. So now it looks like iOS 26.4 may not include some of the new Siri upgrades, and we'll have to wait perhaps until iOS 26.5 or even later iOS 27. Just keep in mind that Apple never mentioned iOS 26.4. This was all reported based on, reliable sources, and now it looks like it may take a little longer for Apple to start introducing some of these new Siri capabilities. Anyway, let me know what you think about everything in those comments down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.